Saya is a sweet and clumsy girl who lives in the temple of a small village in Japan with her father, Mr. Tadayoshi. Her mother was a priestess of the temple where they live and was brutally murdered by a Furukamono, which is a creature that feeds on humans, when Saya was still a child. The young woman's mission now is to follow her mother's footsteps, defending humanity from these evil entities. Saya has abilities that even she is unaware of. One day, Saya sees a very strong white light but cannot reach it. One of her main goals is to discover the meaning of it. Moments later, her father appears and reveals to the girl that that light may contain a prediction of something that will happen in the future, and that will directly impact her destiny. Mr. Tadayoshi asks Saya to tell him immediately in case she finds out anything. As you may have already noticed, Tadayoshi is a very strict teacher and father, but the girl doesn't mind that because she is always very concerned about pleasing him. After their conversation, Saya runs to get dressed and leave for school. As usual, the girl is late. On the way, the young woman goes to Cafe Guamev, where she and her father eat all their meals, since neither of them knows how to cook. There, the girl is welcomed by Fumito, the owner of the cafeteria, who makes the best sweets in town. It is curious that the young man is almost the same age as Mr. Tadayoshi, but appears to be only a few years older than Saya. After having her breakfast, Saya runs to get to class on time. The big problem is that the young woman is distracted by anything that gets in her way. But this time, by some miracle, she manages to arrive even before her teacher. Even her friends are surprised by the situation. None of them imagine that clumsy teenager is a bloodthirsty warrior. Another very intriguing character from anime is her classmate, Takazan. The boy seems to be watching Saya the whole time. Even the girl is intrigued by the way Takazan looks at her. Does he suspect something? During class, Saya has a vision again. Not even the girl knows how to interpret what that was. At the end of the day, the girl runs home. According to her, her father is waiting for her to help him prepare a ceremony. On the way back home, Saya finds a small dog and tries to get close to him, but soon gives up on the idea. After all, she had promised her father that she wouldn't be late. The girl then heads towards the temple, and when she arrives, her father is already waiting for her. They enter the house, and Mr. Tadayoshi informs Saya that the 8 trigrams pointed out that a new Furukamono, also known as the old ones, would appear that night. He hands the girl the sacred katana called a Goshento. This is the only sword capable of defeating the Furukamonos, and it asks her to kill that evil creature. It is now that the journey begins. Saya follows through the woods until she finds something strange standing in a stream. What appeared to be a Buddha statue looked rather strange. The girl pulls her sword and heads towards that Furukamono. Finally, that creature shows that it is in fact alive and goes for Saya. She lands a few blows on the monster, but nothing happens. He goes full speed towards the girl, but she manages to knock him out. But of course, it wouldn't be that easy to defeat that monster, would it? He suddenly stands up and huge claws appear on his body. The girl is attacked again, and the monster manages to knock her under the water. Then he tries to kill the girl by striking a few blows on her in the face. When the statue thinks it has hit Saya, the girl gets up and stabs him in the neck with her sword. The monster throws Goshento away. Clearly, he has no intention of surrendering or fleeing. Saya runs to try to retrieve her sword, but the creature is faster and manages to knock her down. The young woman is now in a hand-to-hand clash with Furukamono. She tries to dodge his blows, but that entity grabs her by the neck and starts swinging her in the air. When all seems to be lost, Saya manages to free herself from those claws and retrieve her sword. She then rips off the monster's arms. Her eyes turn red and she manages to give the final blow. The girl and the entire stream are filled with blood. The creature was dead. When she returns home and sees her father, her countenance completely changes. Saya appears again to be that sweet and helpful girl that her friends know. Even though her hands are shaking excessively together, the two make their way to the temple so Mr. Tadayoshi can purify the sword. In the following nights, new creatures appear and Saya must defeat them if she wants to keep the villagers safe. This time, the creature looked like a blend between a giant bat and a werewolf. The girl exchanges blows with Furukamono. He attacks her and inflicts a wound on her face. The monster manages to knock her down, but when it goes to fight, Saya's eyes turn red as blood again. The next morning, everything is back to normal. After having her breakfast in Fumito's cafeteria, the girl walks happily and humming to school. At lunchtime, Saya takes the opportunity to spend time with her friends there, Yuka, who is the toughest girl in the group, Tomofusa, who is the class representative and in love with Saya, and the twins, Nono and Min, whose mission is to make the girl realize Tomofusa's feelings for her. Saya is very innocent and doesn't even suspect that her friend is in love with her. After school, the girl returns home, and once again, her father informs her of the appearance of a new Furukamono. Apparently, those creatures are getting stronger and stronger. Saya takes the Gashin too and goes looking for the monster, which was even creepier than the other two she had faced. That Furukamono seemed to be a mutated plant. It had dozens of eyes and roots forming a swarf of a tentacle. Saya managed to slice some of them. They grew back, and worse, it also grew some huge teeth. Due to the creature's attack, the tree where Saya was knocked down, and they both ended up in a deep pond. Bleeding and almost without strength, the girl manages to reach the shores of the lake, where Furukamono was already waiting for her. Saya, aware of this, waited for the right moment to attack the monster. As he approached with that devilish mouth, the girl stuck a piece of wood inside the thing, and then finishes with her. This one was close, but Saya defeated that bizarre plan. The next morning, Saya and her dad, along with her friend at the cafe, prepare breakfast. Saya messes up a bit, but her father is supportive and tells her even if she messes up, he will eat the food she makes. Her friend even makes her favorite snack, which Saya eats and feels delighted. On the way to school, the girl meets again that little dog that had crossed her path a few days before. Very carefully, Saya approaches him and finally manages to pick him up. The dog runs away and hides among the bushes. Due to this distraction, Saya is late for class and has to stay after hours to help her teacher clean the chemistry lab. That day, classes ended right after lunch. Saya and her friends then decided to go to Cafe Gamal to eat the best cake in town. There, they are greeted by Fumio. Everyone is happily enjoying those cakes when suddenly a policeman enters the cafeteria. He informs her that the owner of the Nightingale Bakery, the only one in town, has been missing for 2 days. Saya soon suspects that this could be the work of a Furukamono. The policeman asks the youth to return home before dark, as there is no further information about what happened. He says that no Furukamono appeared in the 8 trigrams. But even so, the girl goes in search of the possible creature that is roaming the city. Her goal is to find out what happened to the baker. After searching the entire village, the girl finds the man who was missing. He was wandering through the streets. Saya proceeds to follow him until he reaches a train station. In the darkness of the tunnel, only a train car appears that slowly stops next to the baker. The door opens and the man enters the train. The lights go out and tentacles begin to wrap around the man's body. At that moment, he seems to wake up from a trance state, but unfortunately, he ends up being torn apart by the creature. This time, the doors open again, and now it's Saya's turn to go inside to find out what happened. She notices that the train is filled with blood. The girl looks to the side and sees the machinist. His body completely melts, and the monster appears. Saya realizes that that car is Furukamono himself. She manages to get out of there using the katana, but the train car starts transforming and the creature reveals its true appearance, releasing its tentacles through the windows. The Furukamono starts chasing her, holding the girl by the legs. He throws her away and gets ready to attack her. Saya's eyes turn red again, and from that moment on, she manages to dodge all of his attacks and slices all the creature's small tentacles. She jumps on top of the monster and plunges the sword into its head. The creature screams in pain. Before dying, Furukamono leaves a very strange message for Saya. He looks at the girl and asks her to honor the contract. Saya is still curious about the events of her latest battle. Before dying, the Furukamono who had massacred some residents of her town asked the girl to honor the contract. Confused, Saya doesn't know what contract that monster was referring to and also doesn't remember having made any kind of agreement with those creatures. Before facing him, the girl didn't even know that Furukamonos were able to speak. Saya informs her father of this happening, and he asks her not to be distracted by the words of these monsters. But something seems like Mr. Tadayoshi knows more than he says. Without ever going against her father, Saya gets ready for another day of school. Outside the school, her friends talk about what might have happened to the baker. Saya is filled with deep sadness. After all, she's the only one who knows what really happened to that man. As they prepare for lunch, the girl comes across that same dog she had previously encountered. He climbs the branches of a tree to escape the girl, but she goes after him. During the climb, her bag strap gets stuck on one of the branches and Saya falls from the tree. Takazane, who was passing by, launches himself under the tree in order to prevent the girls after that. She invites him to lunch and the two of them eat together the bento prepared by Fumio, the owner of Cafe Gama. After class, Saya goes to Fumio's cafeteria, which in addition to coffee, serves delicious marshmallows. While eating, Saya had a bloody vision that made her very scared. Fumio asks what happened and the girl says it's okay. At that time, the man holds her face and asks her to tell him if something happens. That night, Saya prepares for yet another battle. She follows the alleys of the city until she reaches the banks of a river, where she sees 3 fishermen. Suddenly, one of them is captured and 3 Furukamonos emerge from the water. They proceed to pursue the other 2 men, but Saya manages to intervene. She flings those monsters away and asks the fishermen to flee. As the girl watches the 3rd creature, one of the other monsters comes by surprise and expels its corrosive venom. She draws her sword and rips that monster's arm off. At that moment, a bizarre scene happens. The other 2 Furukamonos begin to devour their companion's severed limb. Saya takes advantage of the distraction to attack them. She manages to pierce one of them, but the old one, who looks more like a chicken with arms, catches her and throws her overboard. The girl notices that the fishermen are still there and yells for them to get out of there, but unfortunately, it was too late. The monsters have already spotted them and end up taking another victim. Despite all her efforts, Saya is unable to stop them. Once again, the young woman is burned with that disgusting acid and thrown away. She loses consciousness for a few seconds, and when she wakes up, she sees the Furukamonos feeding on the man they just killed. She uses her sword to try to stop them, but hears the 3rd fisherman's cry. The girl looks back and sees that he is trapped. The creature begins to communicate with Saya and asks if she is the one who is destroying them, doubting her powers as the girl was being beaten up. Saya runs towards him, but his lackeys attack her, preventing her from advancing. When she finally manages to head towards the monster that is with the fisherman, he disappears and appears behind her. The girl attacks him, but the creature uses the man as a shield and Saya is thrown again and the other 2 monsters come towards her. At that moment, our protagonist realizes that they are being controlled by the bizarre chicken, who looks at her and also asks the girl to honor the contract. According to that monster, the Furokomanos only eat what is necessary and threaten Saya, saying that if the girl interferes with this, it will devour her too. But she doesn't back down and continues her mission. Her eyes turn red and the bloodthirsty warrior inside her appears. First, she rips off the arm of one of the lackeys and she cruelly kills the other two monsters by cutting them in half with her sword. Now only the boss remains. With Go Shinto's help, rips off the monster's head. She checks to see if the third fisherman is still alive, but unfortunately Saya wasn't able to save him. The next day, everything is normal. Saya goes to school and on the way home stops by Cafe Guamev. There she tells Fumito that she feels a little confused and her head is hurting. He gives her a cup of coffee and asks her to rest. Later, when her father arrives at the cafeteria, he finds the girl sleeping at the store counter. At night, he informs her of the appearance of another Furokomono. The work of a priestess is really not easy. The poor girl can't even get a full night's rest. This time, the fight takes place in a city park. The place is surrounded by fog. Saya can barely see what is in front of her, but she doesn't have to look far. Seconds after arriving at the place, an old one appears. She soon realizes that this creature is completely different from any others she has ever faced. The creature wore traditional Japanese clothing and an ikimagase, which was a type of hat used by Japanese people who work in the countryside to hide their face from the sun. The monster also wore a hat which made it impossible for the girl to see his face. Saya prepares to attack him, but Furokomono quickly dodges and hits her with the shaft of his spear. Then he tries to pierce her, but the girl barely manages to dodge his attack. Throughout the battle, the old one communicates with Saya. The girl tries to ignore his words and focus on the goal of exterminating the creature, which disappears into the mist. Saya, unable to see anything around her, is unable to defend herself. She dodges his spear and attacks him with her katana. Furokomono's hat is thrown and the girl can see his face, which was only a single giant eye. An extremely macabre creature. The big-eyed monster informs Saya that all those attacks the city was suffering were punishment for the humans not fulfilling the contract they made with the Furokomonos. At this moment, a girl appears who is running away from small creatures. In a single blow, Saya exterminates them all and then to attack again the old one she was already fighting. Without much success, the girl realizes that the creature was predicting her movements. She then concentrates and her powers manifest. Saya cuts the air with her sword, pushing away all that fog. Now able to see better, the girl notices the presence of wires coming out of her sword, through which the monster could predict her movements. She abandons the Goshin too and attacks the old one with her bare hands, piercing his head. After giving the killing blow, Saya asks what was the promise made between humans and Furokomonos. Before he could respond, the creature dies and his body is destroyed. Saya walks towards the girl and extends her arm to help her, but the girl panics and runs away in fear of her. At the end of the battle, that suspicious dog appears again. Saya feels a severe headache and faints. The next day at school, the gym class is canceled because of the rain, so the students get together to tell horror stories. Professor Kanako says she knows a real story about the city, and whoever hears it is destined to experience it too. Nin, one of Saya's twin friends, insisted that Sensei tells the story. According to Kanako, thousands of years ago, non-human creatures lived in that city. These creatures were able to assume different forms, including a human appearance. She also says that, although each of these creatures can take a unique form, what they had in common is that they all fed on human beings. One day, somehow people managed to communicate with these beings as some knew how to speak the language of men. But that was to no avail because to these monsters, humans were nothing more than food. That's when people made a decision. Saya asks what that decision was, but before the teacher could answer, the girl has another vision. Her head gets dizzy. She passes out again and is supported by Takuzane. At home, Saya is doing her temple activities when she hears Nin's voice calling for her outside. The girl was worried about Saya's condition. While the friends were talking, a gigantic monster appears right behind Nin. As it tries to attack Nin, Saya manages to save her by grabbing her. The Furokomonos puts his claws out and Nin desperately runs away. He sets off after her, but Saya, once again, manages to protect her friend. Nin doesn't give up on escaping. The girl breaks free from Saya's arms and runs under a bridge. Saya holds the monster with her own arms to prevent it from devouring her friend. In doing so, she ends up being injured. The animal sticks his claws into the girl's back. She manages to get rid of it, pulls Nin, and the two enter the temple. When Saya goes to get her Goshento to kill that creature, Furokomono breaks down the door and devours Nin's head. Seeing her friend like that, Saya's eyes turn red as blood, and in a single blow, the girl annihilates that monster. But it's too late now. Nin was already dead. Her head has been devoured and her body is lying in a blood puddle. Hours later, her father finds her in the same spot, kneeling on the floor and paralyzed. Mr. Tadayoshi asks Saya to rest. The girl is reluctant to do so, but she is so exhausted that she ends up falling asleep on his lap. The next morning, Fumino brings coffee to Saya's room. Tadayoshi told him that the girl wasn't feeling well enough to leave the house. He asks Saya to have breakfast and says he'll bring her lunch later. The man leaves and the girl tries to remember about her past, but she can't. Then she goes back to sleep. The next morning, the young woman is already feeling better. Before leaving the house, her father gives her Goshento and asks Saya to take it with her. At school, the girl meets Tokuzane, who asks her how she is and asks her to tell him in case something bad happens. Tomofusa opens the door to the room and the two enter. All of her classmates are there except the twins, as Nin has been missing for 2 days and her sister hasn't been going to class either. Teacher Kanako arrives in the room and announces that due to the several cases of disappearances in the city, classes would be suspended indefinitely. On the way back home, Saya hears a voice talking to her, but there is no one around except for the dog that she had already met several times. While trying to understand if it was really that dog who was talking to her, Nono approaches the girl. Saya calls her by name and the girl asks her how she knew that it was Nono and not Nin, since they are identical. The interrogation continues. Nono tells that before disappearing, Nin said that she would visit Saya. The girl asks her what happened to her twin sister. At that moment, from the shadow of Nano's feet, a new furukamono emerges. He grabs Saya's neck, but the girl manages to free herself. 2 women appear at the end of the street and the shadow cruelly kills them. After feeding on them, the creature returns to chase Saya. The young woman dodges and the monster devours another man who was passing by. Luckily, Saya was accompanied by her sword. The shadow continues to devour everyone who crossed. Meanwhile, Nono is being held hostage and Saya runs towards the monster to try to save her friend. She is immobilized by the tentacles released by the creature, but uses her blade to slash it and escape. Despite this, that cursed Furukamono manages to trap her again by means of his claws. The girl had her body swallowed by the creature. Inside that thing, Saya is still alive. She finds Nono trapped by some sort of giant web and manages to free her friend, but only finds the girl's foot. Nono had also been devoured. She falls down and cries for her friend since she was not able to save her as well. The next day, a police officer visits the temple and asks Miss Tadayoshi to keep safe as there have been multiple missing cases and leaves. Tadayoshi enters the temple and tends to her daughter, who is having second thoughts. After the last terrifying events experienced by Saya, and after seeing the death of her friends without being able to save them, she begins to question her ability to protect humanity from the Furukamonos, these demonic creatures that feed on humans. As she talks, she feels pain and her father tell her that they will get through this. That night, Saya wakes up in the middle of night and can't go back to sleep. She walks out of the temple, where she finds the dog that had spoken to her the day before. At that moment, Saya has confirmation that that voice really belonged to the dog, with whom she had already bumped into several times. She wonders if that creature is a Furukamono, but the girl doesn't feel any evil coming from him. The animal reveals that it is after Saya to fulfill the wish of someone who came to him. However, to Saya's sadness, he couldn't tell what the request was or even who the person was. The girl changes the subject and reveals that despite knowing she made the promise to protect humanity from the Furukamonos, she doesn't remember to whom she made that promise to. The dog then warns her that every wish has a price to be paid, and the more precious the wish, the greater the price. Finally, he tells Saya that he will stay by her side until she is able to grant the wish she promised to grant. After hearing this, the girl wakes up in her room. It's morning and she wonders if it was all a dream. After finishing some temple chores along with her father, Saya goes to school. It's still early, but the girl wants to get out of the house as soon as possible so she can find out if there are any monsters in town. Mr. Tadayoshi gives her to go Shento and asks that from now on she takes it everywhere. Saya takes her sword, and after having breakfast in Fumito's cafeteria, she walks through the city streets looking for something strange. As she didn't find anything unusual, she heads towards the school, and when she gets there, her teacher informs her that there will be no class that day and asks the girl to return home. Curiously, Sensei recalls the horror story she had told a few days ago. She even says that this could be the cause of all the disappearances that are happening in the city. She finds this suspicious as her teacher keeps mentioning monsters and yet she is calm as well. With no proof of her teacher's involvement in what had happened in the last few days, Saya walks back to the temple. On the way, she is approached by a policeman, who asks the girl to be careful when returning home. But before the man could even finish his sentence, a Furukamono appears and stabs him with its sword. The creature wore armor similar to a samurai, and after cutting the policeman in half, he charges at Saya with his 2 gigantic katanas. The girl draws her sword and barely manages to dodge the monster's blows. When the girl finds an opportunity to make her first attack, 2 new armed arms emerge from the creature's back. The Furukamono runs towards Saya, destroying everything in its path. The girl takes advantage of the situation to lure him to the bridge, which is also destroyed, knocking the monster into the creature recalls the first time it fought Saya and comments that back then, she was a brave opponent. He even says that despite almost not having survived, losing to the girl now would be embarrassing, claiming that she had become a pathetic warrior. Saya responds by saying that she had never fought him before and imagines that the person the monster was referring to was her mother, who used that same sword in her battles. The creature mocks the girl and asks if that's what her father had told her and even says that Saya is a fool for believing his stories. Saya says he is lying to confuse her and Furukamono counters, affirming that humans are liars and insist on violating the contract. Stunned, the girl tries to evade the attacks but is hit and can barely stand. The monster says that after killing Saya, it will go after Tadayoshi. When she realizes her father's life is in danger, her eyes transform and the bloodthirsty warrior resurfaces. As the monster prepares to launch its final attack, Saya, in a single blow, manages to kill it. Before dying, Furukamono asks the girl to ask Tadayoshi who she really is. Saya is annoyed to hear him talking about her father and cuts the creature in half with her sword. At the end of the fight, Takuzane, her classmate, arrives and helps Saya to clean all that blood from her body. The young man was relieved to know that the girl was not seriously injured. He then asks Saya what had happened and what creature that was. The girl is reluctant to say it, but Takuzane insists, and after making him promise to keep it a secret, she tells the truth about the Furukamonos. After hearing the whole story, Takuzane escorts her to her house. Upon arriving there, Saya finds her father lying on the ground and runs to try to revive him. The man wakes up and says he just got dizzy and fell, but on his face there was a stain of blood. Saya insists on asking what happened, but Tadayoshi claims it's okay. After that, the girl goes to wash herself as she was covered in blood. During her shower, that inconvenient dove appears again and notices that the young woman's injuries are practically healed. It also asks if Saya had already remembered who she had promised to protect humanity from the Furukamonos. She answers no, and the animal continues with the questions. Now it wants to know what would happen if Saya broke that promise, and the girl, again, doesn't know the answer. Instead, she has a memory lapse and almost passes out. When she regains consciousness and looks to the side, the dog has already disappeared. For the next 3 days, no sign of Furukamonos. The school had informed them that classes would resume that day, so Saya gets dressed, takes her sword, and makes her way there. She meets her friend Yuka on the stairs, and the two walk into the living room together. Upon arriving there, they meet with the class representative, Tomofusa. As they talk, they give a scream of a classmate who is looking out the window. Students go to check out what's going on and are horrified to spot a terrifying creature similar to a monstrous crab standing on the school's court. Suddenly, the animal begins to move slowly and gradually increases its speed. The monster hurls itself into the building and claims its first victim. He then climbs over the wall and enters the classroom, where Saya's classmates were gathered. As the monster sees several humans around him and starts to attack, at that time, another young man ends up being killed. The students despair and try to get to the door, but the monster stops them. He grabs one of the students with his giant claws and eats her alive. Another student tries to escape through the window, but is also brutally attacked. With no other way out, Saya pulls out the Goshento and prepares to face that thing. As she attacks the creature, she asks her teammates to flee, but there is no time for that. Seconds later, Furukamono throws Saya away and continues to make several victims with its deadly blows. The girl doesn't give up and goes back to him. Meanwhile, the rest of the students try to escape, but are killed along the way. The other rooms of the school were empty. Apparently, only Class B students were present that day, which is already very suspicious. The girl tries to recover from the attacks and runs to catch up with the monster. As she exchanges blows with the creature, some students hide on the roof of the building. Tomofusa realizes the girl is in trouble and decides to go back to help her. With a fire extinguisher, he manages to get the monster's attention so that Saya can escape. Furukamono doesn't give up and continues to chase the students. He arrives at the place where the survivors were hiding and exterminates all of them, including Yuka, Saya's best friend. When she sees her friend dead, something dark awakens inside the girl. Her eyes turn red, and little by little she makes chopped crab. First, the girl cuts off one of its legs. Then she cuts that disgusting tongue in half. She then cuts off all of the monster's paws and finishes with a fatal blow to its head. Even after the creature was all torn apart, Saya continued to cut that thing into pieces. The girl couldn't bear the thought of having lost all her friends. She and the class representative were the only survivors of that chaos. While leaving that place, they find teacher Kanako. Saya passes out and wakes up in her house in the middle of the night. She goes outside and finds the mysterious dog. The girl hugs him and cries in despair. Minutes later, Takuzane appears. The young man was worried because he heard about the incident that had happened at the school. Coincidentally, that day he was late for class, so he didn't experience that tragedy. Saya remembers that she hadn't seen any students from other classes at school. Likewise, no other teachers were present at the school, only teacher Kanako. She asks Takuzane how long they've known each other. The girl was visibly confused, as if part of her past had been erased from her memory. Her father arrives soon after and asks who that young man is. Takuzane introduces himself and Mr. Tadayoshi asks him to leave. Saya then begins to question her father about her past. She says she doesn't even remember her mother's name. She begins to question him and wants to know the truth. Saya continues to struggle to remember her mother and the events of her past, wishing that somehow she can remember. While interrogating her father about these lost memories, a new Furukamono appears to attack them. This time, the creature resembles a ghost with very long hair. Tadayoshi throws Saya the sword and tells her to get up. Saya grabs and draws her sword. She goes towards the monster. When she finally manages to hit it, she realizes that the thing's body is only a single spinal column. As much as the girl cut those hairs, they regenerated and continued to attack her. Topazane, who had just left Saya alone, overhears the battle and goes back to check what was going on, but as soon as he arrives, he is devoured by the creature. Upon seeing her friend being killed, her eyes transform, and in a single sword swing, she annihilates the Furukamono. The next morning, Fumito appears in her room with breakfast. He offers his famous guameves to the girl, who asks him if it is always red. The man mysteriously replies that the color of those marshmallows depends on what you put in the recipe. Later, at Fumito's cafeteria, Saya meets Sensei Kanako, who asks if she could take a look at the books that were kept in the temple. The girl informs her teacher that she could not take her to the library without first asking her father, who was not at home at the time. Kanako insists, saying that she has always been interested in ancient tales and myths. In fact, that was her motivation for moving to that city. Saya then allows the woman to visit the temple's library. After looking at the books, Kanako hands one to the girl and asks her to look closely. The girl looks carefully and notices that both the cover and the pages are new. Her sensei interrogates her, asking if those aren't supposed to be old books. Saya takes another book from the shelf, and when she opens it, she is surprised to find that the pages are blank. She hears two familiar voices coming from outside and goes to check who's there. The girl is stunned to realize that those voices belong to her friends, Nono and Min, who had been torn apart by the Furukamonos. She heads out and sees her friends along with her teacher, who tells that they should end this farce. The twins reveal that no matter how hard they tried to stimulate Saya's memories, the girl always returned to her current condition. The girls, along with teacher Kanako, explain to her that the whole town was just an act and that her true memories have been erased. Minutes later, Takuzane appears. He and the twins reveal that they want to end that theater soon and leave. Everyone in town had been hired to make Saya believe in that reality with the promise that they would receive a reward. Takuzane wanted to receive money as a reward, while Nono and Nin were there in exchange for their criminal records to be cleared. Despite appearances, these girls are far from innocent. They even reveal to Saya that they are part of the main cast, along with Tomofusa, Yuka, Takuzane, and Sensei Kanako. Therefore, they have amulets that protect them from Furukamonos. All the other actors were extras. So even though they are still alive, it doesn't mean that the other people who were killed during the battles are also alive. While Saya freaks out hearing all this, her old friends mock the girl for having been tricked. Takuzane approaches Saya with a tube filled with Furukamono's blood. Kanako informs them that as she was about to die, she was about to die. However, the moment she was captured by soldiers led by none other than Fumito, her best friend in that invented reality. While Saya regained her memory, her classmates recall that at the end of battles, the girl always drank the blood of the creatures she had killed. With that, her eyes would turn red and her memories would return. But when that happened, Fumito would use hypnosis and put drugs in her food, making her forget all her memories again. The teacher then decides to end that game and help Saya recover her memories. But she doesn't do it because she wants the girl's good. Kanako is actually a historian who went to that city to prove her research related to Saya's existence. While waiting for the girl to return to her conscious state, a Furukamono emerges from inside the library. Kanako pulls Saya as the other ones try to escape. Just ahead, they run into Yuka and Tomofusa, who informs them that they violated the contract's rules by helping Saya regain her memories. Then, Fumito appears and orders Kanako to release the girl. While looking at Fumito, Saya remembers a conversation she had with him. During their talk, the man explains that he had found a secret Japanese government document that revealed a deal made between humanity and the ancient heteromorphic beings known as Furukamonos. In that contract, it was decided that these creatures could eat a specific number of humans, just enough to survive. He even says that Saya is special as she doesn't feed on humans, but on creatures of her own kind. So that means Saya is also a Furukamono. Something totally bizarre, she tries to resist the man's evil plans, but she is very weak because a lot of blood is being removed from her body through tubes. Upon discovering that Saya's blood is capable of controlling the other Furukamonos, Fumito proceeds to collect as much as possible to use in his favor in the future. He even reveals that he plans to do an experiment on the girl. According to him, if all her memories were replaced and she was sent to a different environment, Saya would become someone else. The girl claims that regardless, she wouldn't change. So Fumito sends her to a deserted island in what was now Saya's city and starts testing her. If Saya really remains the same, she would receive a reward. But if the girl became someone else during the process, she would receive a punishment. As punishment for violating the contract, Fumito orders the Furukamono, who had appeared minutes earlier, to kill Takuzane. The monster jumps on the boy and crushes his head with its paw, then devour it. Nono and Nin are terrified. After all, they were all wearing protective amulets. But Fumito reveals that after their supposed deaths, he handed them fake amulets. Knowing that they would be the next victims, Nono and Nin try to escape. The monster grabs one of the twins by the legs and slams her body several times against the floor. After killing, the creature devours her and goes after the second sister, who's still alive, has her body torn in half. After devouring her, the creature captures Kanako, who since the beginning of the experiment was wearing fake amulets as Fumito already expected her betrayal. As it was about to swallow the woman, Saya pierces the furukamono's leg with a piece of metal. Apparently, contrary to what her father had said, the Goshento is not the only capable of harming these creatures. She continues to trade blows with that thing and manages to pin one of its arms behind its head. Soon after, Saya twists the monster's other arms so it would let go of the teacher. Even so, the creature does not give up and continues to try to devour the woman. The girl lands some blows on the furukamono's face, but it captures Kanako again and Saya enters the monster's mouth to rescue her. The girl carves one metal bar into the animal's mouth, walks inside its body and pierces its heart. The monster struggles, and when it is about to be defeated, Saya pierces its body with the weapon. The teacher manages to make it out alive, but gets up and desperately runs inside the temple, where she finds Tadayoshi, to whom she cries out for help. He hugs her, and then bites off part of her neck. The man is a hybrid, the result of the union between a human and a furukamono, and he had spent the entire morning feeding on Saya's blood. Because of this, he was under Fumito's full control, as were all the other furukamonos that the girl had faced. Controlled by that evil man, Tadayoshi starts attacking the girl with the same sword she used in all her battles. Saya tries to dodge his blows, but ends up being dominated, with the Goshento aimed at her face. As she tries to avoid being cut, the girl questions Fumito as to why he allows furukamonos to attack people since he has the power to control them. Yuko replies that only the main cast has their safety guaranteed. As for the extras, there's no need to worry about them. Fumito even talks about another of Saya's compulsions, which was set on by someone else with whom Saya had made a contract. This contract prevented the girl from feeding on humans, and she did so in order to protect someone. So Saya won the bet of not turning into someone else after having her memories replaced. Fumito, as a reward, would make her go back to devouring humans. The fight goes on. Saya kicks Tadayoshi in the face and manages to get rid of him. The girl attacks him and retrieves her sword. After being seriously injured, Fumito orders the man to leave his human form, transforming into an evil creature. He takes his sword and goes towards Saya, who, when exchanging blows with him, is thrown away and almost pierced by his weapon. But the girl manages to dodge and does not give up the fight. They continue exchanging sword blows until Saya has her skin ripped by Tadayoshi's claws. Then he throws the girl into the wall and runs towards her. She manages to escape, but is soon hit by other blows. Seeing that the girl is weakened, the creature takes her by the legs and throws her body against the ceiling. Then he throws her to the ground and stomps the girl hard, crushing her organs. Saya tries to get the man to regain consciousness, but soon realizes that will be impossible. He is being completely controlled when she's about to be killed. Her powers are boosted, and she cuts off both of the furukamono's arms. Before dying, Tadayoshi regains his consciousness and reveals that Saya is the first hybrid he had encountered, and despite everything that had happened, he was glad he met her. The girl holds him in her arms, and even though that man is not her real father, she cries for his death. Then she goes after Fumiko. The man breaks a talisman and releases Furukamono, who is soon defeated by Saya. She continues to pursue him, but is taken down by armed soldiers commanded by him. Tomofusa lunges at the soldier to stop him from continuing to attack the girl, but is soon killed. Before dying, the young man reveals that even though it was all an act, he had fallen in love with Saya for real. Meanwhile, that creature released by Fumito regenerated and started to multiply, spreading chaos across the city. What looks like giant, and to escape, they are captured and thrown into a giant bag, which is nothing more than an extension of that monster's body. While some people were captured, others were killed and eaten as if they were snacks. After the bag was already full of humans, another copy of that monster starts to tear them apart with its hands. From inside the car, as they fled, Fumito and Yuka saw all that chaos happening, but didn't do anything about it. To make things worse, the man even ordered soldiers to shoot the people who managed to escape. As they talk, Yuka, the only survivor of the main cast, reveals that her goal in agreeing to participate in that experiment is for Fumito to help her enter politics and become governor of Tokyo. As for Saya, the girl runs through the city streets in search of the man who had deceived her and takes the opportunity to destroy all the monsters that cross her path. She then spots Yuka and Fumito getting into a helicopter and uses all of her power to jump up and get to him. But when she is about to kill him, the man pulls out a gun and shoots Saya right in the head, causing the girl to fall into the sea. Before leaving, Fumito still reveals that the gimabes that Saya liked so much were made from the blood of the furukamonos that the girl had killed. Back on the beach, as she recovers from her injuries, she cries as she remembers all the people she lost. And she is even sadder to learn that none of those relationships were real. For several days, Saya remains in the same place. From afar, that cat that always visited her was watching. It reveals that before being captured, Saya had made a wish. She wanted to remain the same person, no matter what situation she was in, and the cat granted her wish. She tears her skirt and ties it on her head. She finally stands up. There's a different look on her face. She is undoubtedly determined to get her revenge on Fumito, not just for deceiving her, but for all the people he killed. Full of determination, she knows that she must get to the bottom of it.